Hashem, today's Daf Yomi is Zevachim Nun Vav, Zevachim 56. We're going to start two lines from the bottom on Nun Hey Amud Beis. The Gemara tells us, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Ein Chayavim Mishum Tuma. You're only going to be liable for Tuma, meaning to say, if you enter Tamei, ritually impure, into the Temple Mount, you're only chayav if you enter into these places that surround this area. These are the dimensions of the courtyard which you're Tamei. Ein chayav mishum tuma ela al, only if it is orech shmonim meo shmonim v'sheva, if it's 187 amos long, and al rochav meo shoshim v'chamesh, 135 amos. And Rashi tells us something. We're going to tell us that to exclude those areas that are in the offices that are built next to the courtyard of the temple, and they open into it. That those do not have the sanctity of the courtyard, with the remnants of the mincha, that you can't eat the remnants of the offering there, and also the other things that require the courtyard of the temple. Tani Tana Kamed Rav Nachman, 56a, second line. So it was taught in front of Rav Nachman. Kol Zara Haisa Kuf Pei Zayin Al Rochav Kuf Lamed Hey. The courtyard of the temple, the dimensions were 187 amos by 135 amos. And to remind everybody, an amma is approximately, from the elbow to the tip of the finger, which is approximately 1.5 feet. Amar Lei. So Rav Nachman said, when this person, now Rav Nachman was an Amora, so somebody was just repeating a Mishnah in front, or he was repeating a source, a brisa in front of Rav Nachman. And so Rav Nachman responded, Hacha Amarli Abba, Kigon Zeh, Kohanim Nichnasim Lasham, V'ocham Sham Kache Kachim, V'shochten Sham Kache Kalan, Chayava Mishum Tuma. So Rav Nachman responded, this is what my father, but it's question, who's his father? So he's saying, this is what my father, a different source says, Hachi Amar Rabbi Abba, this is what Rabbi Abba said. These dimensions, the Kohanim are able to enter into there and to eat from there, the kache kachim, the sacred offerings, which can only be in the courtyard. V'shochtem sham kache kam, and there they could also slaughter the lesser sacred offerings, the kachikam, like the shlamim, v'chayavan mishum tuma, and also if they go into those dimensions, they're obligated if they enter in tamei. What are we excluding by saying these are the dimensions? It must be limiting something. If you want to say it's to limit the thickness of, they used to have like recessed parts in the walls of the courtyard, and also the doors that were in the walls of the courtyard, and the walls on top. And Shmuel is teaching us that these places are not imbued with the sanctity of the Azara. Tanina, didn't we learn Hacholonos v'Ovei No, we already learned specifically that the recessed parts and the thickness of the walls, meaning to say, and also the doors, they have the sanctity of like they're inside the courtyard. So it must be elamute l'shakos. It must be to exclude those offices, those rooms that were built in the courtyard and the area around it. And they say that those offices do not have the sanctity of the courtyard. The ibenuya bechol, meaning to say, if they're built. What are we talking about? If we're talking about those offices that are built outside the courtyard of Ptuchos Kodesh, and they open into the courtyard, Vatanan, Tochan Kodesh, that we learned in the Mishnah that those offices that are built outside the courtyard, but they open up into the courtyard, we're going to view the inside of them as considered to be sacred, since they open up into the courtyard. So the Gemara says, that concept is only rabbinic, midrabanan, udiarais, but it's only to rabbinic. Rabbinically, we say that you can't enter there while you're tamei because it opens up into the courtyard. Talmud says, udiarais, well, you mean say biblically speaking, it's not tamei. Vatanya was shakos benuyas b'chol uptuchos lakodesh. Let's say you have these offices that are built in the non-sacred part of the non-courtyard area, and they open up into the courtyard. Baruch Hashem, Kodesh Kodeshim. How do the Kohanim can go there and eat from the most sacred offerings? V'shiyari mincha, they can eat the remnants of the grain offering. Tamalomer b'chatzar omo Yahuwah, Torah ribta chatzeres harbe. So so the Torah says that you could have many. The Torah tells us that you can have different eatings in that area, and this teaches us that in this place you're allowed to eat from it, even though it wasn't built in the courtyard of the temple. Since it opens up into it, you're allowed to eat there. So the Gemara says, there's a distinction between eating, which you're going to allow. The Torah said that when it comes to eating, you could even do it if it opens up into the courtyard, and also with respect to Tumah, which you can only do if you are in a place, if you're Tahor, but you can't go there in a place if you're Tameh. We're in the middle of 56a. 56a says the Gemara, Tumah, you mean to say, can't go into those offices that open up into the courtyard of the temple if you're Tameh. We're discussing whether or not those offices, there was around the courtyard of the temple certain little rooms and offices. So we're discussing, don't forget to say the bracha, whether or not those, Yossi, you got it? Whether or not those offices opened up into the temple. Amen. So the Gemara says, those offices that are built outside the courtyard and open up into the sanctuary, the Kohanim can enter into there and eat from the most sacred offerings. But you can't slaughter there the lesser because they're not considered part of the courtyard biblically. So we see from here that biblically speaking, they're so basically the point is that we say so we see from this concept that with respect to the sides, i.e., these offices, that we say that it's biblically prohibited to enter there in a state of tumah, even though there is going to be a chiyuv on this for kares, because it says lishkos abanunis b'chol b'tuchos kodesh kohanim nechvasim l'shem v'ochashem kodshei kodshim. Sorry, I skipped one. But the Araisa, the Gemara, it says that in this concept that you're not allowed to slaughter there and you can't enter there while you're tamei. So the Gemara says, Rav Amras ain't shochatin. Well, no, the answer to that question is, don't we say you're not allowed to slaughter there? Tani nami ain't chayavin. Also, you say, don't say that you're liable for going there while you're tamei, but rather read it that you're not liable. Don't say you're liable mishum tama, but actually rather read it. Hold on. Read it as that you're not liable. So so change the text, and that way it's not going to be biblical. So the Gemara says, Bishlama, it makes sense according to the position that says Ein Shochten, the one that says you can't slaughter there. What's the reason why you can't slaughter? But can I get a Pesach? The reason why you can't slaughter there, because as we said yesterday, you can only slaughter if it's opposite the entrance into the Ol Moed. So that makes sense. But ke'ein Pesach, we require that. But according to the one who says that you're not liable for kares, what's the reason? What's the reason that we have to say that? Gemara says, according to your logic, ain't shochtem. When it says that you're not allowed to slaughter there, milos, aren't we talking about a case ika shlita neged Pesach? Aren't we talking about a case where the office opened up opposite the entrance? And so certainly the Bryce is talking about that case because we're saying you're not allowed to slaughter the kachim column there. Because if it wouldn't be that case, why would we need to talk about it? Even though you're slaughtering it opposite the opening, Tani ain't shochtem mishum delo kadosh. We still say that you can't slaughter it because it's not sanctified. So therefore, Tani nami. So therefore, also say ain't chayavin. So that's why I say you're not liable. So now the Gemara says uachila, and as it relates to eating, Roba'inan, Keneged Pesach. In order to eat it, we don't require you to be eating it opposite the opening into the Omoed. Vataya, Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Omer. Didn't we say Shnei Pishpashin Ayu beBeis HaChalifos? Weren't there two little entrances into the Beis HaChalifos? Govan Shmona, that they were 8 amos high. K'dei la'achshir as hazara lachilos kachei kachim, v'shlichas kachei kohen. And that was to allow you to eat there. So don't we see from here that in order to be eating it, you need opposite to Pesach. So the Gemara says, no, Amar Avina sam mikan achila. No, in order to eat it, you don't need Keneged a Pesach in order to eat the kachei kalim. Remove from that source the words eating. Gemara says, V'aksiv bashulas habasar Pesach ol moed v'shem tachul so. But doesn't it say by the Miluim that they had to slaughter it at the entrance to Olam Moed, and there they could eat it? Where it says, no, that case was different. That was Kachim Shashani. That was specifically by the Miluim. It was one time, but for future generation, you don't require that. You don't require that. So, okay, so now we're up to the next law. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdumi, this is basically going back to what we had tangentially discussed, and I'll connect to it. Minayin Ladam, how do we know that the blood of the sacrifices that was not yet sprinkled, Shenifzal v'shkiyat hachama? How do we know that it became disqualified once the sun set on the day of the slaughter? As it states, the Gemara says, because it states, B'yom ha'krivo zivchol yeyachel. It says, with respect to a voluntary offering, it says, on the day you bring the korban, it has to be eaten. It means to say, B'yom shatah zavech. On the day of the offering, atah makriv. The day that you slaughter, you have to bring it. That means throwing the blood. B'yom she'iyatah zavech. On the day that you didn't slaughter it, iyatah makriv. You're not allowed to sprinkle the blood. Gemara says, but hami b'oil gufe, don't we require this to teach us to teach us that you need to eat the shlomim on that day and the next day? How can we apply it also to teach us about the law of sprinkling the blood? We're on top of 56b. Gemara says, no, im kain, if that would be the case, that it was to teach us about the amount that it takes to eat it, that would be the case. Name a crop yom zivcho yeyachel. It would just say those words. Hikrivo lamali. Why does it have to say in the pasuk the word hikrivo? So the pasuk actually says biyom hikrivo as zivcho yeyachel. But so biyom hakrivo as zivcho yeyachel. So the word hakrivo is not necessary. Shema mina biyom shata zoveach atamakriv. So we see from here the day of the slaughter. That's the day you have to throw the blood. Biyom shiata zoveach yatamakriv. The day that you don't do the slaughter, you don't bring it. Gemara says, maybe the Torah is just telling us, maybe the Torah is just telling us, if that if you brought the blood today, the meat can be consumed today and tomorrow. But if the blood was thrown tomorrow, maybe it's teaching us a different law completely, a new law, concept. That you always have 2 days to eat the meat from the time then the blood was thrown. Gemara says no. Imkain name a crop yom hakrivo yeyachel. Zivcho lamoli. We wouldn't need the word zevach. Shema mina. That's what we learned from here. The idea biyom shata zavech ata makrivo biyom she'iyata zavech yata makrivo. You can only bring the blood on the day of the korban. So now the Gemara. This is a Gemara. There's a little bit of piggle, not that much. Don't get too nervous. The Gemara says. So the halacha is that the shlomim, the korban shlomim, not the Pesach, but in general the korban shlomim, you have 2 days and 1 night to eat it. And then if you can't eat it on the third night, meaning the night after, on the second night, the night after the second day, you can't eat it anymore, but it's only burnt the next day. So let's say when you brought your korban, you thought that you were going to eat it on the night of the third day. Mean to say the time where it was no longer allowed to be eaten, but it was not yet supposed to be burnt. So that was the piggle thought, but it was about a time that was not burnt, but it was a time that you're no longer allowed to eat it. Chizkiah Amar kosher, Rabbi Yochanan Amar pasul. Chizkiah says it's not piggle. Rabbi Yochanan says it's piggle. Chizkiah Amar kosher to go in takus reifa because it's not yet set to be burnt at that time. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan Amar pasul, he says it's piggle. because it's no longer capable to be in at that time, and so therefore it could become pigul if that was your thought. So let's say you eat it at that time where it's supposed to be burnt. Let's say you eat it on the night going to the third day. Chizkiya Amar Pater. Chizkiya says you're exempt. Because it's not yet set to be burnt. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayev. Rabbi Yochanan says you're liable because no longer capable of being in. And Tanya Kavase to Rabbi Yochanan, so we have a price like Rabbi Yochanan. Let's say there's a kachim that's in for one day. Let's say like the chatas. Mechashvin bedaman kachim and achoen yom echad, like the let's say the kachim, the carbon toda, the al nazir, mechashvin bedaman mishetishka chama. So, and let's say you have in mind to when does the pigel start for their blood? Once the sunset, because you can no longer throw the blood once the sunset. Ubibsaran and their meat and their innards, the innards have to be burnt before morning, and their meat has to be in before morning. Mishayawa Murashachar. So then the pigel comes from the dawn. And Kachim and Nechol Shnei Yamim V'Layla Acha. So this is a shlamim. When does the Kachim that's meant for 2 days and 1 night? Mechashvim B'Daman Mishatishka Chama. Then you the pigel starts from whence for the blood from once the sun sets. So it's explicit that the pigel starts on the night going into the third day. That's where it's no longer able to be in, even though it's not yet burnt. That's when, if you had a pigel thought for that time, that's considered pigel. So so how do we know that you can't eat the meat on the night before the third day? That's what the Gemara wants to know. I might think that you could eat the meat on the night going into the third day, vidinu, and it's going to be a logical argument. Zevachim nechol yom echad, uzvachim nechol shnei yomim. So we might have thought, by analogy, some karbanos are in for 1 day and some that are in for 2 days. Just like you have a kachim or a toda or a el nazir that you could be in for 1 day, you could always eat it for the night after that. So too, so too the karbanos that are so too the karbanos are in for 2 days. You should also think they should be able to eat it that night, the night going into the third day. So it says in the pasuk, whatever is left over until the day of the third is going to be burnt. Meaning to say, and the Gemara says we learn out from this verse, it can only be in while it's still day, but it can't be in on the night going into the third day. I would have actually read the verse the opposite way, but that's why we need the Gemara to teach us that would have been the wrong way to read it. Okay. I might think you should burn it immediately once it gets to the night going into the third day. Vidinu. And again, it's a logical argument. We say, carbon can be in for 1 day and a carbon can be in for 2 days. Just like a carbon that's in for 1 day, that immediately after the eating is the burning. So too, carbon that's in for 2 days, you might think immediately after the eating is the burning. It's not a great analogy because one is being burnt at night and one is being. I don't know. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I don't know how they would say it. I can't. Sometimes the Gemara does ask that question, but they didn't ask it here. No, you burn it in the third day and not the night going into the third day. Okay, so now up to the next Mishnah on the bottom of the bottom Mishnah on the bottom of 56a. HaBechor, what's a Bechor? What's a Bechor? Anybody know? What are we talking about here? Right, the firstborn animal has to be given to the Kohen. Meiser, what's the Meiser? The Meiser is the 10th. They take your animals that are born that year, and you take every 10th one, and it becomes a korban. Pesach and the Korban Pesach, Kodshim Kalam. They're considered Kodshim Kalam, which means they're lesser holy. Shlitasim Kol Makom Bazar. You could slaughter them anywhere in the courtyard. V'damon Ton Matona Achas. They only require one application of blood. Rashi says because it doesn't say Saviv. So therefore they just require one application of blood. It's below on the bottom. Meaning to say you have to do it on the sides where there is a base. What side is there a base? Remember, we said on the northern side and the western side, but not on the eastern side or the southern side that they really don't have a full base. And Shina Bachilasan. So how are these Karbanos, the Bechor and the Meiser and the Pesach different? Shina Bachilasan, a Bechor Nechal Kohanim. The Bechor can only be in by Kohanim, meaning to say that the Bechor, when it's brought as an offering, is eaten only by the Kohanim. Because the pasuk says, "Ubisaram yelach," that all the meat of the bechor will be for you, like the chazet tenu from the shov. A meiser kol adam, and the meiser animal is eaten by anybody. Anybody could eat it because it's not considered to be one of the matnos kahuna. Means you give it to the kohanim, but the Kohanim can share with everybody to eat. Now, when you say the Meiser, you say one for this is how you separate it: 1 for me, 2 for me, 3 for me, 4 for me, 5 for me, 6 for me, 7 for me, 8 for me, 9 for me, 10 for Hashem. And so Rapam said that this reminds us of how much everything we have, we're just giving a little bit back to God. Most of it we're keeping for ourselves. Okay. And you can eat the Bechor and the Meiser in the entire city of Jerusalem. You can eat however you want. 2 days and 1 night. Comes along the Pesach. The Korban Pesach can only be eaten on the night after you slaughter it, not on the eve. It's also only eaten until midnight on that night. So this Gemara is going to bring that this is like Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, who says that you can eat the Pesach, biblically speaking, only until Chatzos. So argues Rabbi Akiva, who says that Minatorah, that you can eat the Pesach until the morning. It's just the rabbis made a gezerah that you can only eat until Chatzos. And this corresponds to the Korban Pesach, to the night of the Seder, where some say you have to finish a Seder by Chatzot. By iti afikopen by Chatzot. You could go on all night, but you have to finish afikopen by Chatzot. No, here he says you can. Rabbi Akiva says you can go all night, but Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says only until midnight. He was also one of them. So and the only you have to be registered for it. Rashi says that they were registered when on the money that purchased it. And it has to be roasted. It has to be roasted. Tosfos asks the question: Tema nami Tosfos says, why don't you also list that the Korban Pesach can only be in with matzah and maror? V'tirei tzarav Rabbeinu Chaim. So Rabbeinu Chaim responds. Rabbeinu Chaim is actually, he appears in Tosfos other places. Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen, and he's the one, Yossi. He's the one who came up with the idea that a Kohen that could go to the grave of a tzaddik because a tzaddik is not metame. The kivrei tzaddikim ain't a metamim. I'm not saying that you should do that, but I'm saying that's the concept. That's why you see Kohanim go to like the grave of the OL. The OL. You ever been to the OL? So the OL or to the concentration camps, they said these are tzaddikim, and so they're not metame. Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen. The Tiritz Rabbeinu Chaim, the lo chashav el davar shekenegdo b'kachim. And so what our mission is only listing those things that there's something parallel to it in kachim, and this is different from kachim because this is something that there's no parallel to it. But what about l'menui v'tzli? So menuya v'tzli is kind of different than kachim, fine. Inami lotana matzah morim de'ema akvim. Inami lav mitzvah de gufi. Give two other answers. One is if you eat the Pesach without the matzah morim, you still fulfill the mitzvah of the Pesach. So it's not essential to fulfilling the mitzvah. And alternatively, it's not an inherent mitzvah. Okay, so these are external. They're independent mitzvahs. Matzah morim independent from the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach. All right, we'll stop here. Baruch Hashem. We'll stop here. Everybody have a good day. Yeshakoach.